Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Our guest today is David David Lengui. I hope I got your name correctly.
Yeah, that's right. Langell.
Okay. So our guest today has spent more than 4 decades studying that exact question: what makes him succeed, struggle, communicate, and build trust? David is the founder of Venture Up, a company focused on team building and leadership development. Since 1983, David and his team have worked with more than 400,000 participants and over 8,000 groups across Fortune 500 companies, healthcare organizations, government agencies, military units, educational institutions, and small business. Through thousands of hands-on team challenges and leadership experiences, David has gained a unique perspective on human behavior under pressure, how trust is created, why communication breaks down, and what separates high-performing teams from average ones. Today we will explore leadership, workplace culture, communication, team effectiveness, and how organizations can maintain strong human connections in an increasingly AI-driven world. David, welcome to the show.
You bet. Nice to meet you, Darlington.
Thank you so much, David, and I hope you enjoyed that introduction.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you have spent more than 40 years studying teams. What originally sparked your interest in understanding why some teams thrive while others fail?
Well, we at Venture Up, we started as a more of an adventure extreme activity company where we were doing ice climbing, caving, ski mountaineering all around the world. And our clients were primarily a lot of CEOs, CFOs who had the time and the money to go on those kinds of expeditions. And so we got to create good relationships with them. And they started coming back and asking, hey, could we do some team building programs for their staff? But of course, they didn't have, 5 or 6 people. They had maybe 300 or 400 people. And they didn't have, 2 or 3 weeks to go somewhere on a glacier. They had, maybe 3 or 4 hours. So that was back in the early 80s. And we took a hard look at it and realized that, with all the different types of kind of extreme adventures we've been doing all of our life on big mountains and cliffs and caves, and we've been doing team building indirectly ever since we could remember on a personal level and professional level. So we kind of adjusted and we got more in the professional development world for corporate development of teams. And we're primarily doing that by the late 80s, early 90s. And of course, that's what we do today. So it was an interesting transition from what our clients were asking for, because originally when that happened, team building didn't really exist for corporations. It was a very small, budding industry. And so we helped define what it was around better communications, making decisions, embracing change. And we kind of played off a lot of military, different types of programming to create the programs that we run today.
All right, thank you so much, David. So, through working with more than 400,000 participants, what are some of the biggest patterns you have noticed in successful teams?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, Darlington, that are across the board. I mean, we get calls every day from different types of companies, pharmaceutical companies, banks, engineering firms, and the first thing they'll always say is that, hey, our group is totally different. Everybody's really smart, right? And our response is that everybody's really smart at what they do. Everybody's good at what they do. And that ultimately, it doesn't matter what your industry is. It doesn't matter what kind of company you are. The first thing is that every single company out there is in the business of people. And I don't mean your customers, I mean your employees. You need to treat your employees like they're your best customers because they're going to create the brand and the culture around your organization. So that's number one. Every single business is in the business of people first. That's their own people. And then you need to take it a step farther because, well, how do we treat our best customers, which are our people? And it really starts with communications. Um, we hear about that all the time. Communications drives everything, and it's true. Communications gets people to do things, but it's more than that because any action that you want somebody to do creates risk. And there's the risk of being wrong, the risk of getting in trouble, the risk of getting somebody upset, the risk of losing money, the risk of getting hurt. And so communications is not just to get things done, they get the people to take a risk. And so we need to communicate well enough so people can act and mitigate the problems around that action so they can deliver the best outcome. And so that's really imperative because the problem is, of course, we all think we're so good at communicating across the board, you, me, everybody else, because we do it all day long. We talk to people, we do presentations, we send emails, send texts. But the reality is, we all need to constantly work on our communication skills. We know what good communications is. It's supposed to be checked for clarity, checked for understanding, two ways. We've all heard that. But how often do we really do it? So often communications is like, I need you to do this, that, and the other thing, right? And then I leave. Or I keep saying, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, expecting you to fill in the blanks. But the reality is everybody you're talking with also is busy. They also have a lot on their plate to do. And they're just trying to process what you're talking about along with organizing everything else on their plate that day. And so good communications is checking to make sure they understand that what it is that you said is what they heard and understood. And that takes work, right? We can't just assume. And so communication starts with the leader, ends with leaders, and they have to lead by example. Hey, let me make sure I understand what you just said. Blah, 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 blah. Or after you've asked somebody to do something, ask them to give it back to you because you'd be amazed how often they can't do it. And it's not because they may not be paying attention. It may be because you're not taking the time to truly give them information. And then here's the last, and I know I'm talking a lot, but here's the last thing about communications. I mean, we do this every day. And that is, if communications is so important and it starts and ends with leadership, the problem is that the better we are, the more familiar we are with a situation, with a process, with a task, the more we have a tendency to minimize the communications around it. Because we understand it so well, we just expect whoever we're talking to also understand it completely without us really giving them all the details. And that's where we start running into problems. So the more educated we are, the more experience we have, the more familiar we are with the task, the more we have a tendency to be our biggest challenge in the communication process and minimize that. And then here's one last little point to remember, because people study communication styles and skills. The reality is nobody ever has to be taught how to communicate well. Everybody knows how to communicate really well. Because when there's a lot on the line, like you're going to lose a lot of money, or you're going to lose your job, or you're going to get hurt, every single person gets really good at communicating. They don't have to be taught because they don't want to get hurt. They're going to get really clear about it and make sure everybody's on board. And that's, I guess, the real key takeaway is treat everything that you're talking about as more getting somebody to take a risk, and then maybe they'll communicate more clearly.
You often use team challenges and experiences to review how people communicate and lead. What can a simple challenge reveal about a team's culture?
Sure. Well, culture is an interesting word that we use within organizations because a lot of times we think that, hey, we write a motivational statement on the wall, or we give motivational speeches and inspirational speeches, that creates the culture. But that's not it at all. The culture is, of course, what your employees talk about when you're not around. It's what they feel when things are more quiet. It's the frustrations that they feel. And so culture isn't, or let me put it this way, companies don't have problems because they make a decision. It's a lot of small decisions that create cracks, holding people accountable, doing what they say, being upfront and humble and honest, letting know people what the rules of the game are. And so the games that we play are based in that, being flexible in leadership, being open to new ideas, not just saying it, but actually listening to others. The problem with communications is so often when we listen to people, we're really listening just to think about how we're going to respond, how we're going to talk them into our way of thinking. But that's not listening at all. Listening is trying to hear what a different vantage point is or a different viewpoint is because we're trying to solve a challenge or a problem. And then the other thing is that a lot of times when we talk about listening to other people, we're all open to ideas. Yeah, we are. But you know what? It depends on the messenger, depends on their background, depends on their educational background, on their experience background, maybe their age, how much they make, how much money they have. And so the point is that real communications is open to everybody, regardless of the amount of experience. And that all goes back to the whole point of culture. You want to have, obviously, um, flexible leadership because everybody wants everybody to have ownership and get ideas out there. You want to have this level of trust so people can say anything and not fear that they're going to look silly or there's some kind of embarrassment or retribution. You need to be able to be respectful that everybody has a different background, different culture, and they all look at things differently. And so they need to feel like they're part of the team. They also have to understand what the rules are, what the goals are. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of task based people. So culture means a whole lot of things. It's not just what we write on the walls. It's not just what we say. It's truly embracing those differences and that the diversity helps us solve all kinds of challenges and open up all kinds of innovative ideas, but we've got to be open to them.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you so much, David. How does a leader gain influence without using authority or influence?
Okay, gotcha. Sure. Well, I mean, number one, every single company of any size has managers, leadership, people in different roles, right? But the main thing is that when you're creating a team, the main thing is to create clarity on the team. And that means who's responsible for what, who can make what kind of decisions within certain types of parameters, what the rules are in terms of whatever it is that we're asking them to be engaged in. Because if people don't know what it is their role is, or they're not clear on their accountability, on their responsibilities, then people start making assumptions. They start filling in the blanks. And they also start then becoming cautious about what they do. It's kind of like, let's just say you have a team of soccer players, right? And you want them to all go out there and play soccer, but you haven't explained the rules of the game. So they don't really know what to do, what positions mean, how you score points, how you play the game. And so they're going to run around and really just kind of be cautious, not get anybody's way. Well, organizations are the same thing. So you've got to empower people to be able to make decisions or give them the parameters. They just have to understand what role they have, what latitude they have, and it has nothing to do with the hierarchy or the title of the people in the company. Because you can talk to the owner, you can talk to the CEO, president, CFO, and they're going to tell you that I want leadership from the bottom up. And all that means is they want people to be engaged. They want them to take ownership. They want them to take pride and responsibility in it. I don't care if they're sweeping the floor. I don't care if they're driving people around. I don't care if they're running machinery. I want their I want them to be involved so that if a problem arises, they take care of it, and ultimately they represent the company and I guess the culture that we're developing. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I'm just saying it's very difficult for employees not to perceive uh, that the leaders are using authority over them. For example, now when the uh, employer wants something to be done in a particular way and the
Yep,
employee is not doing that, how can the employer make the employee to do what he or she wants by not using authority?
sure. Well, there's a couple of points to think about on this. I mean, first of all, if you think about owners or managers or leaders, they excelled at something to get where they are, right? They knew something better. They worked harder. They took total control. They took ownership. They were more accountable. They put the hard work in. That's why they're in the position that they're in. But with that is a problem because they took total control all the time for their own well being and development. They unfortunately are kind of control addicts because they're used to just being in control and being responsible and just trying to get the job done. So then we come back to okay, let's just say you have leadership and they're trying to accomplish something and somebody's not doing it the way they expect them to do it. Well, the leadership has two choices. The obvious, easiest thing to do is just step in and do it. But they're not solving any problem besides the immediate one. And what they'll find is that the same problem is going to constantly keep coming back. And so what they're doing is they're managing the symptom of not having it done the way they want it to do, as opposed to managing the problem of the employee not either feeling confident or competent to be able to do it. And those are two very big different things. And so if you have an employee that doesn't want to do it your way, it's up to you to find out, well, why is it you don't want to do it? Is it that you don't feel comfortable, that you don't have the time, that you don't have the resources, or that you're just totally resistant? You don't think it's right. All of those require a different answer. If they don't have the time, the resources, or the skill, then you need to make sure you give them that skill so they can solve that problem and take ownership. It's okay if they make mistakes because if they're not making mistakes, they're not growing and building confidence. If the employee, of course, just is thinks there's a better way and wants to do it a different way, then have them work with leadership in terms of looking at that possibility, evaluating it, and then making a decision together what they're going to do. Ultimately, leadership's in control. They're the captain of the boat. And if they want the boat to float over to Morocco, that's where we're going. Maybe the employee instead wants to go to Paris. Well, then we've got to have a choice. We have to have a discussion about where this boat's going to flow. But most people, in all honesty, want to do a good job. Most people, are trying to do a great job. They just may have a different way of looking at things. And so they have to be heard. Leadership needs to talk to them, listen to them. But ultimately, you got to make a decision together in terms of the direction you're going to take. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. That answers my question. So, uh, talking about Fortune 500 companies, you have worked with five Fortune 500 companies, military organizations, healthcare systems, and small businesses. So, what leadership lessons apply across all these different environments?
Yeah, but obviously there's a lot of difference between a very, very big company and a small company with maybe 5, 6, 10 employees or family-run companies. There's challenges for both, and there's advantages to both. Um, but the commonality between all of them, or the common factor, is I go back to the idea is that the first thing they've got to think about are the people that they're trying to work with, and that's that they're employees. Because ultimately, nobody can do it alone. You need those other people. I don't care if it's a massively, 1,000 person, 20,000 person company, or again, it's just a small family owned business. But the reality is that all those people that you rely on, that you need to have help you, again, have their own biases and their own egos and their own needs, their own dreams. And so you need to be able to manage them accordingly. And it doesn't have to all be my way or no way. We're trying to go a particular direction because as a business owner, big or small, you have a choice. You either do it alone or you're going to do it with other people. Obviously, you can do more with other people. But that doesn't mean kindness is weakness, because ultimately, management and ownership knows where they're trying to go with the resources they ultimately have. And maybe not all the other employees understand all that or take on that type of stress. And so ultimately, they've got to create clear guidelines for those organizations to be able to rally around. And again, those aren't just words and statements. They're way how they're going to be ways how we hold people accountable, ourselves included. How we can move forward so everybody understands what the rules of the game are and the opportunities.
Okay, so employee engagement is a major challenge for many organizations. What can leaders do to create workplace where people genuinely want to contribute? Also, bearing in mind that they might not be happy with their pay.
Yeah, so in employee engagement, I mean, you got to think to yourself in terms of people that work, whether they work for a company, whether they work for themselves, whatever it is, people need three things. They need to have something to do, something to work on, they need to have something to believe in, and they need to have something to look forward to. Bottom line, if we have to have something to work on, something to believe in, and something to look forward to. And so if you think about that with engaging employees, of course, the first thing we think about, hey, is just pay people money. And of course, everybody needs to be paid a reasonable amount of money for the services that they give. Everybody has a nut to crack. They have bills to pay. They have their own needs and their own dreams and whatever it may be. But money isn't all of it. If people are only working for money, that is a very short-sighted relationship, because you can go make money anywhere. And if people are just jumping job to job to job to job, there's no commitment to the organization. They're just simply expecting you to do a job based on the money I pay you. But if you really want long-term success with employees, you got to understand that people don't stay in those types of jobs just because of the money. They stay there because they believe in the purpose and because they like the people they work with and they like the service that they're providing. In fact, a lot of people stay in jobs where they make less money, or as opposed to going somewhere else, because again, they enjoy the people they work with and they believe in the organization that they're working with. So that organization is giving them back more than just pay. And that's what's important. Here's the other thing is that if you talk to people about pay and you ask them what they're worth, across the board, it usually comes to be about 10 to 15% more than they're making. And there have been a number of studies that show that if you then indirectly go and you pay those people maybe 15%, 20% more than they're currently making, well, they're going to be excited, right? They're going to make more money. But the reality is, if you ask those same people about a year or two later, what are they worth? You'll get the same answer. And so the point is that money is very transitory. We'll have a tendency to spend whatever money we have. The experience is what's also equally valuable. So, as an example, and that's the experience of working with the company. So, let's just say, as an example, I have a choice as an employee or employer. And let's just say you're already making a reasonable wage so that you're not struggling, you feel positive, and the future is bright. But let's just say I'm going to give everybody $1,000 bonus at the end of the year. Great. I give you $1,000 bonus and you'll be excited. And in 6 months, if I asked you what you did with that bonus, you wouldn't be able to tell me. Maybe you paid off some debt. Maybe you went to a few restaurants. Maybe you bought some presents. Who knows? But you won't be able to tell me. But instead, let's just say I took you and your spouse or somebody else. I took the company employees and we all went to a hotel or a resort. And for 3 or 4 days, we all went golfing and we had some business meetings and we had great food and we had good motivational work in terms of getting people on the same page, not just worrying about the problems of business. And we celebrated the fact that everybody's part of this team within this company. And it cost me $1,000 per person. Well, I will tell you that in 6 months, if we ask that person, what did you do 6 months ago? They'll all be able to tell you, oh, we went here. It was great. It was fun. It was so great to meet other people and enjoy each other's company. That $1,000 became 10 times more valuable to that employee than I would suggest just having an extra few dollars in their pocket for the moment.
Okay. So do you believe AI will make teamwork easier, or will it create new challenges for leaders and organizations?
AI is changing everything, isn't it? Yeah. If you are as old as I am, we were in business before the web came on. And I still remember creating our own personal websites back in the late 90s before anybody had websites. And then when the web really blew up starting in 2000, 2001, it changed everything. Companies were accelerating. The way they were doing business was different. And then, of course, mobile phones came in and people became more virtual. AI today is like that change on steroids. It is creating more opportunity, more potential for so many more people than ever before. And it's affecting everyone. The interesting thing about AI is that there's a lot of people are embracing it, of course, a lot of really smart, sharp people who are finding that they can do that much more, that much quicker, that much faster with the skill set that they have. And then in a lot of areas like the US, I'm not so sure about Africa, but we have a whole nother population that is really resistant to it. They're concerned if it's going to affect their job. They think that it's going to create more discrepancy. Point is, number one, AI is not going to go away. It's going to be here one way or the other. Point number two is it will never be more stupid than it is today. And it is far from stupid. It is incredibly capable. And every single day, it's getting better, quicker, and faster. So how does this all relate to teams and companies? Well, bottom line is AI accelerates the access to information, right? It analyzes things quicker, gives us new ideas, gives us alternatives, gives us potential solutions faster than we could ever come up with it before. But number one, faster doesn't just mean better automatically for teams. Because the challenge today isn't getting additional information. It's what are we going to do with it? That's a huge challenge. All of a sudden, AI is this incredible brainstormer that we can all sit around with 100 different opportunities or options and possibilities, but somebody still needs to figure out, well, what's the next step? So AI is creating efficiency, but people will create the effectiveness around it. And so companies are investing and hopefully managing their people to look at how do we utilize the strength of AI so we can magnify the opportunities in front of us. And here's my last little point on AI. I don't know how old you are, Darlington, but I know you're a lot younger than I am. But
Well,
here's my here. How old are you, Darlington?
I'm 30.
You're 30.
Yeah.
You are. So here's my feelings. If you're anywhere from, let's just say, 22, 23 years old and about 35 today, you are in the incredible sweet spot of opportunity with AI. Because if you're younger, you're still probably in high school. You're just trying to figure things out. Maybe you're going to college, some kind of technical school, trade school, but you're still trying to figure it out. What do you want to do, right? You're still trying to mature a little bit. And if you're maybe 35, 40 years old, you're already busy doing something. You're already entrenched, right? You've got responsibilities. You got things you got to worry about. You already know what your job is. Now you just have to keep figuring out how to solve it and be more successful at it. But you're busy. If you're between that 22, 23, 35, whatever, you are in the world of you've got some maturity. You understand all the different possibilities of business and what you like to do and different types of problems and challenges out there. You've got the curiosity to be able to move forward and to really embrace AI to make yourself 10 times more powerful and strong in any kind of an industry than you could ever do before. And if you're within that age frame, you've got the energy to do it. Whereas on one side of it, you're maybe too young. And on the other side, you're probably a little bit too old because you're already too busy taking care of other responsibilities. So, dude, you're right in the middle of it. So good luck.
Okay. So, honestly, I hope I can make the most of AI in this age because, yeah, when we try to build some things, especially AI videos, most platforms are requesting we pay a huge amount of money for credits. So I don't know. It's not as easy as it sounds, except there's something I'm missing. I don't know.
I don't know how it is in South Africa, but I know that in most parts of, well, certainly throughout the United States, definitely parts of Europe, parts of Asia, that of course you can. There are free parts of AI that anybody can access, right? And then of course you can pay for upgrades in those AI systems, relatively nominal. But there are also free learning uh, parts of AI like DeepSeek and so forth coming out of China, which are totally free. And the point is that whatever a person has, the resources they have is what they have to start with. It is never an excuse that I don't have the money or I don't have the time, I don't have the education, or I don't have the background to move forward and get involved in something. Because whatever you have are the cards that you've been given. And let me tell you, there isn't some of the most major companies in the world were built by people who had far less than 99% of the people out there. They just had the drive. And when I talk about build a company, it doesn't need to be $1 million, 10, 20, $50 million company. You can build a small business that is great in terms of supporting you and your family, and it gives you the flexibility and the security and the knowledge that, you know what, I am in charge of my own future, as opposed to come work for me and you're simply going to be building my dreams. But you're always vulnerable because I own the ideas, I own whatever you worked on, and that's a totally different potential long term level of stress for people. So, anyways, I think that the opportunities are there for people to look at it. Now, if you're trying to, solve nuclear fusion or certain types of genetics, Yeah, you know what? AI, maybe you got to pay for it. But here's the last point, and that is there are absolutely amazing companies that have been built for the last 100 years, and they didn't have cell phones, let alone AI. And so anything is possible. Don't use access to AI or money as a crutch why you can't do things. In fact, I had a person working for me for quite a few years. He came from quite a bit of generational wealth through his family. His great great grandfather. So we're talking about in the 30s. Obviously, things were a lot different. But this one man helped create Pan American Airlines, Caterpillar, and Whirlpool, three of the biggest iconic companies in the world. And that was long before people were still using typewriters. So, anyways, that's my take on it.
All right, David, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a very exciting episode. Thank you for sharing your insights on leadership, communication, and what truly makes teams work. Your experience shows that great teams are not created by accident. They are built through trust, intentional communication, shared purpose, and leaders who understand people. So for those who want to learn more about your work and venture up, how can they do that?
You bet. So again, my name is David Langell, and I'm with a company called Venture Up, and we do experiential training programs with small, intact leadership teams, 10, 12, 15 people, and we work with big corporate groups of up to 1,000. Easiest way to get a hold of us is by our website, and that's www.ventureup.com.
All right, thank you so much. And
Thank you, Darlington. Good luck with everything you do, man. You're in the prime of it all, and I wish you luck.
all right, so if this episode is speaking to you, make sure to share it with someone out there who needs to hear this. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, I will see you guys again. Remember, the strength of any organization is determined by the people who choose to build it together. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye, guys. Thank you, David.
Take care, Darlington. Good luck with everything in 2026 and 27. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good luck too.